For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you the latest news from the Siva Valley conflict. Here in the 96th conflict of the Foxhole War, it's day 21. Breaking news coming out of Faranic Coast after several weeks of siege, concerted siege from the north. The Wardens have taken out the town, Colonial-held town of Husk Hollow. It is reported that the eastern safe house broke earlier before the town base was destroyed just moments ago. Colonial forces are reportedly, remnants of the Colonial garrison at Husk Hollow are reportedly still holding out on the western safe house, although time will tell as to how long it will take before the safe house is destroyed. Skirmishes already reported on the bridges, the rail bridge, as well as the established footbridge and vehicle bridge that leads to Pleading Wharf across the River Mersey. The fight between Tara and Husk Hollow, especially the one near Husk Hollow across the reaping fields, was one of the highest casualty hotspots of the opening few days of the war. And it seems that the Wardens have finally broken through after many, many casualties. At least 38,000 confirmed dead in Faranic Coast, the highest casualty count so far of any region. The only one that comes close is likely to be either Deadlands or Endless Shore, each coming in at about 30 or so. Combined casualties in the war so far already topping 200,000, near quarter of a million here in day 21. Sporadic fighting still happening all across, concerted fighting happening across the front lines. But here in Faranic Coast, where the Wardens had been bearing down much of their resources and efforts on the town of Husk Hollow, the Colonials finally seems to have broken for now. It is likely that the Colonials will hold the bridge at Pleading Wharf, although we will see what kind of defensive measures the Colonials had planned or what they can come up with in the aftermath of the fall of Husk Hollow. But in the meantime, we will have to wait and see. More developments as the war continues in Siva Valley. For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you the latest news from the Siva Valley conflict. Here in the 96th conflict of the Foxhole War, it's day 29. Colonials hold firm onto early gains in the center east, while Wardens in the west make important strides, all while field machine guns begin to hit the field. A reminder that the PressCorps is focused on Able Shard, and this is out of necessity rather than any sense of superiority. Good luck to all those on all shards on all fronts. Combined casualties for this war on Able are over 320,000, with the Wardens at a 7% share of those losses, likely owed to significant but costly territory gains to the west. Faranic Coast continues to be the deadliest region with about 54,000 total dead. Currently, both factions are suffering a total of over 9,000 dead per hour. These numbers are provided by foxholestats.com. In the Deadlands, the Colonial Legion are holding firm on their forward positioning on the north side of the River Mersey despite some recent setbacks. The Wardens continue to hold on Iron Passage and have continuously made incursions into the plaza. Fighting in north-centered Deadlands is currently situated around Pommel Annex. Meanwhile, further northeast, the Colonials had attempted to cut off supply lines at Callahan's Gate, establishing a forward base in the fields east of the town, but Siva's troops managed to repulse the raids and move down Callahan's Belt. However, the Colonials still have plenty of fields and forests to work with in east-central Deadlands. In Endless Shore, the Colonials continue their expansion out of Saltbrook Channel, splitting their attention across 3 narrow nearby paths of attack across the North Star, and effectively utilizing frontline build pushing to wear down the Warden defense. For their part, the Wardens continue to have a link between Brackish Point and the rest of the region. In Faranic Coast, Warden troops successfully broke through the Colonial position at Husk Hollow on day 21 after fierce bunker sprawl fighting that dominated casualty reports. The next day, day 22, the Wardens then made a move on Jade Cove, first coming down Sickle Hill, taking the Apollo's Landing district before finally capturing Jade Cove itself. Fighting is currently situated just outside the Jade Cove ramp that connects the city to the lower thirds of the region. In Fisherman's Row, the Wardens managed to take the town of Idolo after multiple layers of Colonial defense were forced southward. Currently, the Legion still holds the town of Arcadia and have a sizable amount of the sector at least under contention. However, the nearby Warden position at Fort Ember continues to threaten the Colonial town and potentially cut it off from further reinforcement from the south, should a clockwise flank from the fort go unheeded. In Marben Hollow, ongoing static but intense combat ravages the land between the Colonial-held Spit Rocks relic base and the city of Maiden's Vale. The line has remained stagnant for a few days now, but the body count nonetheless continues to rise. In Godcrofts, the Legion-held island housing the town of Isawa has managed to fend off multiple Warden incursions both by bridge and by watercraft, as the otherwise all-blue region remains a solid hold in the River Mersey parallel. For the weather, no major weather systems are currently being reported by the PressCorps storm chasers, and sunny skies all around. Please note, though, that all of our weather data is gathered manually by our storm chasers who go out into the field and report back what they see at that time. If you'd like to join the storm chasers, then make sure to stop by PressCorpsGaming.com and look for the Weather Service menu. And then at the bottom of the Weather Service, which houses a map of current weather reports or the most recent weather reports, at the bottom of that web page is information on how to join the storm chasers. We'll continue to bring you news as it comes across our desk, and as the 96th conflict, the biggest conflict by far, double the size of any of the previous highest numbered conflict in War 70, and one that will continue to rage on for quite some time, to say the least. For the Press Corps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. Attention, for the Press Corps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you the latest news from the Siva Valley conflict. Here in the 96th conflict of the Foxhole War, it's day 31, and I am joined by Press Corps Colonial correspondent Moth B Mann, who is not currently at Fisherman's Row, but is here to tell us about the Colonial retreat from Idolo after its capture by the Wardens circa day 23.
Yeah, that's correct, Geoffrey. I was at Arcadia, just south of Idolo.
I'm sorry, Martha, coming in a little quietly. I don't know if that's me or if that's maybe your microphone.
Oh yeah. So how's this? Is this better?
That's much better. Thank you.
I was at Arcadia, just south of Idolo in the Biden Crossroads, where the Colonials had set up a defense in depth trench system in the Torch of Demeter field. That field itself is a cornfield, just a series of plots with a road basically cutting around into that sector. After the Wardens took Idolo, they began to push southward very rapidly, and the Colonials were basically trying to build defensive trench lines to stop the Wardens from advancing. As luck would have it, though, a couple of newer soldiers, recruits, I suppose, accidentally dug some trenches a bit too far away from the coverage of the garrison houses, and the Wardens took advantage of that, began to exploit it into a trench network to the northeast of Arcadia Town Hall. And the conflict there lasted for a few days. And basically it just turned into a really big meat grinder. Wardens were digging into trench lines, trying to encroach onto the garrison positions of the bunker base just outside of the town hall. And Colonials were not only attacking north, but they were attacking east as well to try and counteract that push. Field machine guns were brought up. And there was just a lot of crossfire going on. It was almost impossible to hear anybody conversing at that moment.
This sounds a lot like the fight at the reaping fields in Pharaonic Coast between Husk Hollow and Terra, mostly at Husk Hollow, that dominated many of the casualty reports in the opening, 20 or so days before it finally fell on day 21, I believe. But it sounds like on these open plains, it is Bunker City.
Absolutely, it seems to be a tried and true strategy for both sides. Actually, to secure their positions, they have to build these entrenchments to protect the perimeter and to keep the enemy from coming in. What happens as a result is that these trench networks suddenly, or over time, through combat and mammon grenade usage and other explosives and just general infantry nonsense, these trench lines become intermingled, and it just becomes a spaghetti net. It's just a web of trench systems that go every which way, because there are soldiers that are engaging in a certain trench line, and soldiers from another faction will try to dig into that trench line to charge it, take control of that trench, and at the same time, the other side is digging more trenches to try and flank them, and it just becomes this web of curving uh, trench dugouts that really have no real purpose other than to just act as mobile cover for infantry. And
There's. Mhm.
I was going to say that what it comes down to at that point is just we're at a point now where combat is stagnating on most fronts, and the only way to really push through is for mass infantry attacks with high explosive weapons.
Mhm. That may actually be harder or easier depending on the use of the field machine guns, which have been deployed over the past several days. Did you see any during your time in Arcadia?
I did actually. I saw that the Wardens were in control of 2 field machine guns. The Colonials had 1 of their own, but the combat between them was not direct. It was more or less just suppressing trenches with enemy troops in them.
Mhm.
It was just an exchange of fire with that. So the field machine guns weren't engaging each other directly, except for maybe a few sporadic moments. Everything else kind of came down to a field machine gun would suppress a trench so that infantry could push up with grenades and clear it.
There's the old story about three frontline engineers digging a trench together, each one working in tandem to try and get the dirt out of the earth, out of the ground, and just kind of get that trench built. But then once it is built, they all go off in different directions from that same trench and essentially build 3 different items for 3 different reasons, and then suddenly it just becomes a completely useless piece of earthwork.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the anatomy of how a trench system develops, expands. It's like an ecosystem. It's like a living organism in and of itself. And I'm sure if there are any city planners that have been conscripted into the war, they must be tearing their hair out at these kinds of fights.
Well, if they're alive, sure. I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure that anybody who is a civic engineer that was recruited into this conflict is most likely dead.
Either dead or a quartermaster. So it's 50-50.
It's
But
yeah,
there is also the tried and true but sad story of the, yes, as you mentioned earlier, the new recruit just trying to help place down a trench, but then it winds up being utilized by the enemy, and then being actually the linchpin into how the enemy breaks through. So it's a learning curve that unfortunately many just have to go through, and just kind of learn from their mistakes. It's a hard lesson, but one that eventually does need to be learned.
yeah. It's like I said, it's a stagnated conflict right now, and it's only going to be this way until either the Sievish military or the Legion decides they want to release more hardware to the front lines, which has been a pretty common result of this stagnation in the trench lines.
They absolutely will, because this is already double the size of the war, at least in terms of amount of troops deployed, double the size of any previous the previously largest conflict. War 70, when there were about close to 6,000 simultaneously troops deployed, we have now reached nearly 12,000. And that number is going to stand around there, probably drop as the opening festivities of war settle down. But certainly the breakthrough of the Wardens from neighboring Oarbreaker Isles through down south, hitting Peripti landing first by a reported barge and motorboat, taking Peripti landing, flanking north to Blackwell, and then finally threatening Idolo, and then that drive down to Fort Ember is probably the most action, the most forward action we will see until mechanization, until both armies mechanize. But for now, the Colonials are reportedly fiercely fighting to take back Fort Ember at the least. So we'll have to see. Moth, do you have any advice for anyone that's out there right now in Arcadia, among those bunker cities, among those trench lines?
If I had any advice to give them, it would probably be just keep your heads down and return fire. That's probably the best course of action you can take.
You know, it's hard for troops sometimes to just be static, though. We've noticed this. It's a curious thing here in the Foxhole War. In many other wars, troops will gladly step by and take a nap, but in the Foxhole War, there is a need, an impetus to do something, and it makes the front line very interesting.
It's a curious thing, that's for sure. And honestly, I've seen this so many times, but even now, I'm still stupefied by the absolute visceral, scene that's unfolding.
Yeah. Well, we got plenty more of those stories as the war goes on. Make sure to stop by PressCorpsGaming.com. Thank you for listening, all of our listeners out there. We appreciate the engagement. And you can stop by PressCorps Gaming for the audio-only stream and take this broadcast with you on the go in a much more, in a less visual component. We'll say that. So for the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings, joined by PressCorps Colonial correspondent Moth B Mann. Moth, thank you so much for your time.
Anytime.
For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We interrupt this program to bring you the latest news from the Siva Valley War Zone. Here in the 96th conflict of the Foxhole War, it is day 31. The PressCorps Weather Service has issued a severe storm advisory for the following regions. Terminus. Rain is continuing to fall and watchtower coverage is impacted. Be on the lookout for mud patches which cause encumbrance on your person. Wind will have a stronger effect on the shells of fire support platforms. There is a chance for the rainstorm to get worse or calm down to a more manageable level. Again, a severe storm advisory has been issued for the following regions, namely Terminus. That may expand in a bit. Stay tuned to the PressCorps for more information. If you want to keep a pulse on the weather updates that we gather manually through our Storm Chaser Corps, make sure to stop by PressCorps Gaming, PressCorpsGaming.com, specifically the weather service page.
Just do your best and take a rest. Sing yourself a song.
For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you the latest news from the Siva Valley conflict. Here in the 96th conflict of the Foxhole War, it is day 32. Colonials continue to hold firm onto early gains in the center east, while Wardens in the west make important strides, while the FMG continues its deployment across the front line. A reminder that the PressCorps is focused on Able Shard. Combined casualties for this war so far over 337,000, with the Wardens at a 7% share of those losses, likely owed to significant but costly territory gains to the west. Currently, both factions are suffering a total of over 9,000 dead per hour. These numbers provided by foxholestats.com. In the Deadlands, the Colonial Legion are holding firm on their forward positioning on the north side of the River Mersey. The Wardens continue to hold Iron's Passage and have continuously made incursions into the plaza, however. Fighting in North Center Deadlands is currently situated around Pommel Annex. Skirmishing continues among the fields and forest lines of East Central Deadlands, where the line is more porous. However, a Warden raid temporarily destroyed the Callahan's Boot town base. However, it was quickly rebuilt. In Feranic Coast, Warden troops successfully broke through the Colonial position at Husk Hollow on Day 21 after fierce bunker sprawl fighting that dominated casualty reports. The next day, Day 22, the Wardens then made a move on Jade Cove, first coming down Sickle Hill, taking the Apollo's Landing district before finally capturing Jade Cove itself. Fighting is currently situated just outside the Jade Cove ramp that connects the city to the lower thirds of the region. In Marben Hollow, ongoing static but intense combat ravages the land between the Colonial-held Spit Rocks relic base and the city of Maiden's Vale. In other news, the Colonial base Swords of Morrow, or SOM Regiment, details their Day 1 capture of Loggerhead via Keeleen O'Connor on YouTube. The video depicts over 20 SOM personnel using infantry tactics from rifle work to grenadiers to take the town. If you have more reports, self-reports in terms of what you've conducted in the front lines and in the war, make sure to stop by PressCorps World Headquarters through the Discord link below, or simply share it in the Foxhole official Discord. Let the community know what you're doing out there and give us plenty of historical artifacts to work with. Rainstorms reported in the southeast, particularly Terminus. PressCorps putting out a storm advisory. A severe storm advisory for the following regions, namely Terminus. Rain is continuing to fall and watchtower coverage is impacted. Be on the lookout for mud patches which cause encumbrance on your person. Wind will have a stronger effect on the shells of fire support platforms. There is a chance for the rainstorm to get worse or calm down to a more manageable level. Again, a severe storm advisory has been issued for Terminus. Stay tuned to the PressCorps for more info. And you can stop by PressCorpsGaming.com/weather to join the Storm Chaser Corps if you are so interested in helping us gather this weather data as it continues to break across the 37 regions. That's all we have time for the moment, but more news breaking as always. Make sure to stop by PressCorpsGaming.com. For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. We'll see you in a bit.
The PressCorps is a non-profit creative collective of artists, reporters, and players from the MMO video game Foxhole by Siege Camp. Our mission is to engross our audience in and amplify the stories of this unique war ecosystem. The PressCorps was founded in early 2018 by former Planetside 2 Radio Free Auraxis host CaptainInArms. It is a separate community entity and is in no way representative of Siege Camp. For more information, visit the PressCorps Discord through the link below.